Hey, well, I don't know if anyone was following along today on the kind of spiritual, social journey that I went on. I went for a walk. It was just going to be a walk. And if you have noticed that I actually look more sunburned today than I did yesterday, which didn't really seem possible for me at the time, pale face that I am. Well, yeah, it's very possible. I was just going to go for a walk. But along my walk, and if you haven't seen it, please go to my wall. There are a couple videos. On 25th Street and Hampton Boulevard, there was a homeless man, laying on the sidewalk, and people had stopped to help him. Someone had already called the EMTs. There was a lady there trying to get him up. He was out cold when I first got there, and it was not looking good for him. And he had a hospital bracelet on his wrist and all his hospital paperwork clutched in his hand that said he had had a seizure and had a heart condition, and fabulously had made the decision upon release to drink alcohol and lay in the sun wearing black clothing while being a person of color, and he was out there. I mentioned person of color because I'm also going to tell the story of another homeless man tonight. It's my brother, obviously not a person of color, and how across the board it really just does not matter one tiny bit what race, creed, color, religion you are. A person laying in the hot sun is a person, whether they're a homeless person. See, the connecting thread there is person. So it was a long journey today because he was not going to let the EMTs help him. The EMTs ambulance arrived and he shooed them away. And he got really upset, but he was extremely out of it, delusional, kept passing out. And the EMTs had to leave because he said he didn't want help, so they had to leave and leave him there. And I tried to walk away. I'm going to tell you, I tried. I did. I walked, and I walked for a while. But the thing is that I was on the telephone with my mother when I happened upon this scene, and my younger brother, Adam, was bipolar, alcoholic, drug addicted, and homeless at the end of his life. And my brother passed away in New York City in a stairwell. Yes, it was his own doing in many ways, but I always wish that someone had stopped for him. So this is not in any way a clapback to anybody who has suggested that, you know, some people just cannot be helped, and that is true. You cannot help someone who doesn't want to help themselves, but sometimes you have to help yourself by doing absolutely everything you can. So that was the day today. I want to do a shout out to Assistant City Manager James Rogers, because I texted him and sent him the video of the man and the address, and he sent community services out there and they couldn't convince him. But I'd had a situation with him where it sort of started to click that he was starting to mumble about God, and that God was just leaving him there. So I put on the full 9 yards of Southern preacher imitation. Just said, he kept saying, Jesus wants me to, just stay here. And I said, Jesus, God, they sent us here to bring you home. You're a lost sheep. They said there's a lost sheep at the corner of 25th and Hampton Boulevard who's thirsty and hungry and needs to be in the shade. And he sat up and he says, Jesus and God want me to drink this? I said, yes, they do. And he drank the whole bottle of Gatorade. And then he said, what do they want me to do? I said, they want you to go lie down in the shade. He says, I can't see anymore. Everything's black. I said, you could do this. We're going to do this. We're going to walk you over there. And he got up because he said Jesus wants him to walk over there. I said, yeah. And he got there and he sat in the shade. And so when the city manager, Mr. Rogers, called me back and he said he won't get in the car with the officers, I called him back and I said, hey, try this. Just tell him that Jesus wants him to get into the car and go. He's like, really? I said, really, try that. About 20 minutes went by and I got a text message saying he got in the car. He's getting help and he's getting medical attention. And so teamwork made the dream work. Now I'm going to explain to you exactly why this is the deal. So this is the story of my brother. This was written for the New York Times many years ago. My brother passed away 5 years ago this year. This is from February 2003. And it's called Terror Every Day, When a Brother is Mentally Ill, Missing, and Dangerous. I helped put my younger brother in prison. Knowing that makes my heart wrench, my eyes leak. It also makes my family and others safe. As a psychiatric patient, he has slipped through the cracks in our medical and legal systems for 15 years. He's often homeless, surviving through cunning and the angel that must weep on his shoulder. Because he's over age 18, privacy laws force estrangement from family members who want to help. We're not allowed to know where he is, and so he thinks that we abandon him. We are not free to help therapists piece together his history as he bounces from one place to another. The mental health system has so little continuity, coordination, and communication that if you want an adult mentally ill family member cared for, you have to hope the patient breaks the law so that the court will step in. My brother has been jailed repeatedly and was on probation for violent, destructive episodes. When he was medicated and stabilized, he was a perfectly lovely, witty man who plays the guitar like Segovia. It never lasts. When he's unstable, he thinks of his family as a threat and a target for destruction. In early January, he became unstable, slipped the bonds of his treatment program, and was on the loose. He'd been in this program because I testified against him before a New Jersey Superior Court grand jury 2 years ago. I sat in front of strangers recounting the horrific messages he left on our answering machine threatening my children. As part of a plea agreement, he was sentenced to 4 years in a halfway house for making terroristic threats. He was free to come and go, but on a strict schedule, reporting to a probation officer regularly. Violating that agreement would most likely mean serving the original jail sentence. After he smashed up his room at the halfway house and took off, bench warrants were issued for his arrest. Nobody notified us. Only after he called a relative in New York and her caller ID spat out the source of his call did I learn that he was in a psychiatric ward at Bellevue Hospital in Manhattan. He had checked himself in for a breather. This is typical. Too often, by the time a doctor does see him, it's after he's medicated for several days and he seems just fine. It generally takes several ins and outs at hospitals before he hurts someone and is arrested. Then he's finally held, not in a hospital where he can get help, but in a jail without any treatment. According to the state laws in New Jersey and New York protecting patients' rights, the hospital will not notify the family or confirm that the patient is even there. When I called Bellevue to say that there were warrants out for my brother's arrest, a nurse told me I had no right to ask for her cooperation. The probation office is not staffed on weekends or holidays when most of these problems occur, and we weren't allowed to know where his halfway house was, so we couldn't call those caregivers. No right to know, no right to help. The only officials the family could call or help were the police. They said they would look into it, but they couldn't tell us anything or notify us of his arrest. Was he back in the halfway house? Could we relax? Were we safe? Was he safe? Sorry, you don't have a right to know. As it stands, all official parties are free to do a bad job of patient care and public safety because families who could monitor them, who would monitor them, are effectively cut out. So I went on my own spree, contacting everyone from the police and the hospital officials to state legislators. I unabashedly begged for help. Is that the system? Begging? Somebody, I may never know who, finally coordinated an effort among New York and New Jersey prosecutors, the police, and the hospital, had him picked up upon release from Bellevue and put into prison. He called my mother from Rikers Island to tell her he thinks I ate him. I have to live with that because without the medication and monitoring, he will die violently, or somebody else will. Or someday, I will sit in a court and I will have to face the family members of someone he hurt or killed as they ask, why didn't you stop him? So I stopped him. It won't be the last time. Jail is not the answer to mental illness because you cannot rehabilitate a disease. I faxed a letter to Senator John S. Corzine. An aide called to say she thought the senator would back this issue. She asked me to spell out what I thought was needed, and here it is. We need a tracking system for psychiatric patients that coordinates mental health agencies, the police, hospitals, and families. My hope is that other family members of the mentally ill who want the right to protect themselves, their neighbors, and to help their ailing loved ones will take up this cause too. Because if we're all going to beg, we might as well beg big and get something done, because it beats waiting for a phone call that's never going to come. There's going to be 3 stories tonight. So the second one, I want to, in advance, thank my friend Leanne Azar, because Leanne, among many other people, has just always been there. Whenever I had a big ask for the homeless, she would just like poof, like a genie in a bottle. She'd be at the door, and this was one of those times. And I know that parts of this story are going to rock people's worlds, because I'm not saying that homeless people are all good people. I'm not saying that it's not their own fault. I'm not saying that they haven't done things wrong. All I'm saying is that they're people. They're people. And people make mistakes and people do terrible things. But we're people too. And we need to look at the big picture, and this is part of that big picture. Homeless offenders need shelter and redemption. Helping the homeless may begin with a hot meal and shelter for the night. But if we want to end homelessness, our efforts must extend to leaps of faith and acts of humanity. Because my brother, age 44, is bipolar, unwilling to accept my help, and often homeless by choice in New Jersey and New York City, I tend to compensate by extending what little assistance I can to those within my reach. This is 2014, by the way. I've learned about the harsh realities facing homeless men, women, and children of our region. The rules for homeless shelter are pretty similar from state to state. Adults who have been convicted of a crime are not welcome at most of them. They often end up sleeping outdoors, and shelters don't allow the guests to stay there during daylight hours. When I volunteered in January to help with a Norfolk emergency shelter team at my church, I was told the daytime rule is designed to encourage homeless people to seek more permanent arrangements rather than making a safety net into a hammock. Therefore, during the daytime, when it's extremely cold or hot, the homeless gravitate to libraries and shopping malls. Around here is Starbucks. When not trudging all over town to find meals. Over the past 6 years, I've run a free chess program, the Norfolk Initiative for Chess Excellence, at libraries, community centers, schools, and parks. Chess venues and the homeless have a whole lot of overlap. A few months ago, I met Anthony, 44, who is one of those consigned to homeless purgatory after having committed a crime of downloading child pornography onto his home computer 5 years previously. Learning he was homeless took me a month, and I didn't find out he was a registered sex offender due to the pornographic downloads until a week ago. All I knew was that he plays chess well, is a genius at helping others understand the game, and is always at the library on Saturdays. However, I also noticed that he absolutely refused to play chess with or near children. But I figured he's like many adult chess players who fear the humiliation of being beaten at the game by a child. What Anthony was really doing was self-monitoring in a system where he says he was released from a correctional facility without a housing plan, instantly compromising his ability to maintain contact and remain trackable by the system. An online search of the Virginia Register of Sex Offenders database showed half a dozen registered sex offenders in Norfolk listed as both homeless and untrackable due to the lack of a fixed residence phone or reliable internet access from which to check in with authorities. Now that I know his restrictions, Anthony will only interact with adults during chess events. I made a terrible, unforgivable mistake by downloading that junk onto my computer, Anthony said. I knew it was wrong. I did it anyway. I really don't think most men know what can happen by downloading something like that. They don't know, but you lose everything in your life. It's like a death sentence. When Anthony told me he was homeless and that he didn't stay in shelters, he didn't explain why. A man gave me a small tent a while back, and that saved my life, he said. Last week I found out that the tent had been stolen while he was getting a meal at a church soup kitchen. A friend of mine, Leanne, donated a one-man tent for Anthony. She also donated a bedroll and a sleeping bag and a mat for the sleeping bag. For 3 days after getting the tent, I searched every feeding program and shelter I knew, but no Anthony. He was simply gone. On a Wednesday evening, I saw him riding his bike down my street. I have never ever seen him in my neighborhood before, and I called out his name and said, "Were you looking for me?" I asked, as he stared at me like I was a ghost. He wasn't looking for me, but he was looking for nostalgia's sake to take a bike ride to the house where he grew up. And as it turns out, it's the house right next to mine. So I handed him his new portable home. "This is a miracle," he said. "This is a tent," I told him. "It's not the tent," Anthony said. "It's that God led me to you every time. Maybe that means he'll forgive me if I keep doing right. Maybe someday, if I do enough right, maybe I can come back someday." I think if we all start doing right, Anthony and others like him can find options that are safer for the homeless and for the communities in which they live. So, this is my brother Adam. It was my brother Adam. This story ran in the New York Post, the New York Times, the Christian Science Monitor, and on NPR. So, thank you, New York, for helping my homeless brother. Around the holidays, the news tends to focus on the homeless, but not from the perspective of the families who have lost them to the streets, as I lost my younger brother who died there this month. My brother Adam Goldenthal's life ended at age 45 in a cold subway stairwell in Union Square, where he fell asleep for the last time. He was found in a nest of flattened cardboard boxes, according to the city officials with whom I spoke. It's likely his heart just gave out from years of smoking, alcohol abuse, and living rough. It sounds so peaceful for the nightmare stereotype come true that I'd always prayed wouldn't be the way he died. Alone and cold, on cardboard, in a subway. I hoped at least for a hospital bed or a shelter. I dreamed of him being well, able to be with family here in Virginia or New Jersey with my mom. If the homeless are called the invisible people, their families are called nothing at all. If we're lucky, and by those who think we abandoned our loved ones, they think we turned our backs and don't care. It may be true for some, but not for any I've ever met. Adam was bipolar, alcoholic, and had lived on the streets for the better part of 6 years when not jailed for minor crimes. There were many different iterations to Adam. To many, he was that funny homeless guy who played gorgeous classical and jazz guitar while puffing on unfiltered Camel cigarettes outside the Starbucks locations around Times Square or Barnes & Noble in Union Square. To police, EMTs, ER, security guards, social workers, shelter staff, and transit police. He was that often witty homeless guy who went off at the drop of a hat, spewing obscenities and spinning wild, paranoid, delusional tales as he went down swinging at the world that he couldn't fit into. To my 85-year-old mother and me, he was someone we loved too much to walk away from, but who frequently took aim at us both physically and spiritually during manic episodes. Then he was terribly sorry. People said he was here to try our patience, but I think he was here to test our humanity. And New Yorkers, you passed. I'm thankful for every person who ever cooked a meal at a shelter, set up the cots, and cleaned up the messes. Every police operator, dispatcher, ER worker, shelter staff, and jail personnel who ever took the time to call me with updates has my undying gratitude for giving me and my mother even a moment of knowing that Adam was alive. Because I'm a journalist, Adam gravitated to those in my profession, particularly at the New York Post, where he once found a sympathetic ear from a young reporter named Kate. While his manic ramblings were not something she could print, she listened and treated him with respect, for which he was thankful. Mostly, I want to let every person who ever dropped change into a homeless person's hand or bought him a cup of coffee know that they did something valuable. You, the givers, are my inspiration. I have always freely handed money, food, and time to every homeless person who crossed my path because I knew that you were crossing his. He told me about every random act of kindness. Know that every time we give, both the homeless person and their family members are uplifted. While giving to my brother couldn't save him, it gave longevity to our humanity, our sanity, our hopes, which is a big thing for a little spare change, some understanding, a cup of joe to be able to do in this world. While our family is smaller this holiday season, it's bigger with all of you as honorary members. God bless you, everyone. That's why. That's why Paul, his name, a homeless man that I met today, that's why Paul didn't die on the street today. That's why. It's not because I want people to think that I'm cool. There have been people who really have taken a lot of their spare time to send me direct messages over the years when I post videos like the ones I posted today, because they wanted me to know that they thought that I was trying to make myself special or cool or beloved. No. It's because I feel that I was none of those things because I couldn't save my little brother. So, somewhere Paul has a family who probably doesn't even know he was laying on that street today in the 80-something degree heat, wearing black clothes filled with alcohol and fading away to black. As he said, I'm fading to black. Everything's fading to black. And now it's not. For one more day. He may die tomorrow, and there will be nothing I can do about it. But today, on my watch, didn't happen. I got to call my mom, and I got to tell her that for the moment, he's okay. And what she said to me was, you keep doing that, okay? You keep doing that for us. You keep doing that for Adam. So, that's why. So if you see somebody laying on the streets of Norfolk in the heat or the cold, please remember that during COVID-19, there's no library for them to go to cool off. There's no mall. There's no Starbucks to loiter in. There are no bathrooms to use. So if you see someone and you can help, and it's not going to hurt you in any way, and you can do it safely, please do. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of you for being here tonight. Good night.